What I'm doing on this job is I've removed the upper cabinets because we're just going to put open shelves. So then we're removing this tile around there, then right through here. I've already started removing it, and it's chipping off pretty easy. Hopefully that's all the damage I'm going to be doing, because then I'm going to resurface these areas. So in order to get this tile off, I tried prying it first and it wouldn't pry off. So I'm hitting it with a hammer, and then it goes off pretty easy. So that's going to be the method I use. This damage to the drywall, it's not super good, but so far so good. I think I can patch it up pretty easily. You can see that it's not going terribly well. I'm doing a little more damage than I had hoped I would. These areas here, I'll definitely have to put in some new pieces of drywall. Then one thing leads to another. There used to be under cabinet lighting, so we're going to have to pull that out and actually turn this into a single gang box too. I'm removing this little wall section here. First thing I did was I removed the piece of drywall so I could make sure there was no wires or plumbing in it. Then I just took my Sawzall and I just cut right through the studs, because that'll make it a lot easier for me to take this wall down. The drywall got damaged a little more than I wanted it to. Plus, we had to move a switch here. It used to be a double switch. Now we're not having under the cabinet lights, so it's just going to be a single. So I'm just going to replace this drywall. So what I've got here is I pre-cut a piece of drywall, and I'm going to just trace around it as opposed to cutting it out first and then measuring it. So I'm just going to take my pencil and trace it around the top of it. So you can see I've got it all marked out. Then I'm just going to take a utility saw, this utility saw, and just cut that all out. All right, what I've done here, this is a live electrical outlet. So I just tipped it into the box. I'm going to use my router to cut that out. With the other outlet here that I haven't cut out yet, I've just marked. And what I'm going to use is my drywall router to cut these out. I'm going to start over here in this outlet. That's the first one. Now this one here, just going to find the edge and just go around it as well. As I move along, you'll see where I've removed the tile, and this does look bad. I mean, I know you're probably thinking, oh man, what are we going to do? Maybe we should just re-drywall it. And that is an option. It could be cut off and a new piece of drywall attached in there. But I'm not going to do that. I'm going to do something else. I'm going to clean this up, and then I'm going to apply a coat of joint compound and like a membrane over the top of it to get it as good as new. I also have this area over here where the back of the cabinet was actually glued to the wall. So that's gonna take a little scraping and a little sanding, but that'll clean up really nicely. One thing I do here is I scrape off all the loose material and the excess glue just using a taping knife. My main concern really is the loose paper on this drywall. And what works best for me is I just take a coarse sanding pad. This, I don't know what coarseness that is, but it's probably like a 100 grit or 80 grit or so. And see, when I just sand this, You see, it really does a nice job removing a lot of the loose material. This area where I've removed the tile is pretty beat up. So I'm just going to take a scraper and scrape off all the loose material. Doesn't have to be perfect. All I'm really trying to do is remove the loose material. And then what I'm going to do, I'm going to sand this area with my sanding stone, of course. And that does a pretty good job removing the loose material. And then I'm going to apply a sealant over this that'll tighten all this loose stuff, paper and materials. Tightens it right up really nice, so then I can apply a coat of compound over the top of it. All right, this is the material that I sealed the drywall that was damaged when I removed the tile. This is a product called Zinsser Guards. What it does, it helps to, it penetrates, seals, and binds those unstable surfaces. So it's really nice. All I did was roll it on with this little roller, and it probably took like an hour and a half to dry. Then I was able to put the compound on it. But this just helps ensure that I'm going to avoid having loose paper flashing through after I coat it. I have some seams on the walls that need taping, and some other damaged areas that are going to need some tape put on. I got a seam here that the tape has come off of. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to mix up some setting compound. The setting compound comes in dry form, comes in a bag, and you mix it with water. So I'm just going to mix some up in my pan. This one here happens to be a 45. The one behind it is a 90. I'm going to use up the 45 first. The 45 means it's going to set up in about 45 minutes, and the 90 in about 90 minutes. In this case, I would actually prefer something relatively quick, so I'm going to use up the 45. I just add some water into the pan first. So I've got quite a bit of water in there now. And then I'm going to add the dry compound to that and just mix it till it's the proper consistency. I probably want it a little bit thick since I'm doing quite a bit of filling here. I just attach a mixer to my cordless drill and stir it up. It's a good idea to add the dry mix to the water. That way you're not starting out with something too dry. Because I can see right now it's going to be a little thin, which is good, because I'd rather add compound than I would water. What I have is quite a few gaps around all these patch ups I have here. So I'm just taking some of the setting compound and I'm just going to push it into those gaps first. It's called pre-filling, even these holes where the electric used to come through. I'm going to put a little compound right into that. Even along this badly damaged area here, I'm going to just fill that. Then what I do, I take some of this self-adhesive mesh tape and I'm just going to put it over all these seams. This is going to strengthen them, and it's a real nice tape because it's quite thin, because I'm trying not to create any bumps. Keep everything as smooth as possible. These holes where the electrical wires went through, I'm just going to take a piece Okay, that's good. This area that got damaged pretty badly when I was removing the tile. So what I'm doing is I'm just going to take some of the setting compound and I'm just going to fill those areas. Try not to build it up. I don't care if it's a little bit recessed right now, because that's actually better than a bump. And even this seam here where it's actually a seam for the drywall, where the tape had come off, I'm going to put a little compound in there right now too. And then I'm going to take the mesh tape once again, and I'm just going to strengthen this. I'm just going to put it right over the top of the damaged area. Multiple layers of it just to cover the whole thing. And right on this seam as well. A lot of times what I do, once I get the tape over the seam and these repairs, I'll just put a thin coat of the setting compound right over the top of that right away. The beauty of the setting compound is you can put it on quite heavy and it sets up chemically. So if I want to put a coat of tape on or another coat of mud on this again, I can in 45 minutes because it'll be set up chemically. I don't have to wait for it to air dry like you do with regular compound. With that being said, maybe you don't want to buy a setting compound and mix it up and do all that. So this could be done with a regular all-purpose compound. It's just that you would have to wait quite a long period of time between coats of compound. So the job would take a little bit longer if you didn't use a setting compound. That's why it's what I prefer. Okay, these are the walls that are the most damaged, and these are the walls that I'm going to resurface with a fiberglass matte product, because I want to strengthen the whole thing and smooth it all out, all in one application. What I'm going to use for that is this fiberglass matte product. It's a 3-foot wide roll of fiberglass. It's not a weave, it's a mat. And it gets embedded in an all-purpose heavyweight compound. So I'm gonna pre-cut 4 pieces, 20 inches long, which is a little longer than I need, but it's easy to cut. So it's better to have it just a little bit long. Just cutting it, eyeing it up square. Doesn't have to be perfect because it's a little bit long. What I'm going to use to embed the fiberglass mat is an all-purpose heavyweight compound. I pre-filled all the gaps and the seams with a setting compound, but this is an all-purpose heavyweight compound. It's the best compound to embed tape or the fiberfuse in, because it's nice and strong, it's got lots of glue, and it's really going to help it adhere and strengthen this up. I've also thinned it down. I've added water. This is something I had left from another job, but you can see it's actually quite thin already. So I'm just going to scoop some out and put it in my pan. Then I'm going to take this taping knife and I'm going to apply it over the wall, and then I'm going to embed the fiberfuse into that compound. I'm just getting it on the surface, and I'll worry about getting it smoother in a minute. But right now, I'm just trying to make sure I have it getting it onto the surface. It's not going to be really thick, but I'm going to try to avoid having any dry areas. You can see the compound is pretty easy to work with. If this was a thicker compound, I would have a hard time getting it on nice and smooth, because it was too hard to work with. So if you find that you're applying this and you're having a hard time getting it a uniform thickness or a hard time embedding your fabric into, it's probably because your compound is too thick. Okay, so I've got it on there about how I want it. Now I'm just gonna spend a minute here and just take my taping knife and just smooth it out. Get rid of some of the larger tool marks. Okay, so now I'm just going to bed the fiber fuse right into the compound. I have a little gap along the back. The countertop isn't tight to the wall, so I'm going to start out by just sliding this down into that gap a little bit. And then just going to fold it up into the compound. Now it cuts pretty easy. So all I use to cut it with is my taping knife. Like right here, I just need to slit it so it slides up in there. And then I need to slit it around this cabinet. So just take my knife and cut it right there. I'll just cut that excess off right there. Now it doesn't have to go up real high here. So I'm just going to take my knife and just cut that off too. Same with this electrical outlet. There's no sense of pre-cutting or anything because I can see right through this. I'm just going to take my knife, taping knife, and it's a little long. It's a little long by this casing, but actually slid behind it, so that's good. Now I don't need to go way up higher because this is just a painted wall that's in pretty good shape. So I'm just going to take my knife, same thing. I'm just going to slide it right along and cut off the excess. Now once I get it all pre-cut and fitted nice, now I take my taping knife and I push it in. The beauty of the fiber fuse is it pushes right into the compound. You can see as I work, the compound is actually coming right through it. So all those little imperfections and cracks and bad areas are fixed all in one application. But this, of course, will need another, when it dries, I'm going to sand it and I'll put another thin layer of compound over the top of it. And when this dries, it is really stuck good. You're not going to get it off because that all-purpose heavyweight compound is a great adhesive to hold this in place. I just want to show you what compound I'm using for my finish coats over these walls. I embedded the wall reinforcement and my tape in a all-purpose heavyweight. Now I switched to a lightweight compound. I like the lightweight compounds because they shrink a little bit less and they dry very quickly and they're also very easy to sand and easy to work with. So this is what I'm always using for my finish coats. I do thin it down a little bit. I've added some water to this already, and you can see that it's thin, but not so thin that it's just running right off the trowel. The wall here on the right is what I did yesterday. That's where the wall reinforcement is embedded in the compound. Now today I'm applying another coat over the whole surface. I have the compound applied already. Now I'm just going to smooth it out. All right, in order to smooth this compound out, I like to use a wider taping knife because it helps bridge any little valleys or low spots or high spots I have. So I just draw the knife right across the compound, just smoothing it out. And you can see how nice it gets because I did put plenty of compound on to start with. If you put it on too thin, you're not going to be able to get this good of a result. But putting the wall reinforcement on first really helped a lot in allowing me to get this nice and smooth. Okay, so what I have here looks pretty good. I have some tool marks in it, but it is a pretty heavy layer of compound, so I'm going to have some tool marks. But I most of that will sand out, so I probably will just have to sand it lightly, and then if I have any areas that don't sand out, I'll just have to fill them with compound. But that's most likely going to be the last heavy coat of compound I need to put over this. I'm going to start doing some sanding. What I like to use is a power sander. It's actually hooked to my vacuum, and it spins and it sands pretty aggressively, but I have it on relatively slow speed, and I'm using the 220 grit paper. So that's what I'm going to do the rough sanding with, and then I'm going to do all the little touch-up sanding with a sanding sponge. That'll get me in all the little corners, but this sander here is going to do the bulk of it.